Hi. Hi, guys. My name is Mason. Thanks for coming back for episode 2 of In the Air with me, your host. Today, I'm really excited to introduce you guys to a very close friend of mine, Julian Watkins, who works for the New York Department of Health, but also runs a incredible advocacy program and kind of the talk series, art project called the People's Clinic with a co-worker of his, Carlota Starks, who I also really love. This was a really, really great conversation that I think kind of, we talk about kind of like the holistic nature of kind of tackling contemporary public health. We talk about the advocacy work of kind of the ACT UP era of AIDS activism and how that's still very applicable to today. And we just go through kind of like a plethora of just kind of topics around kind of what it means to be healthy in 2020, which is like a very sprawling convo to say the least. So I'm excited for you guys to watch, and yeah, enjoy. See you guys after the episode. Hi everyone, my name is Mason. This is the second episode of Up in the Air, and I'm really excited to have today's guest on. My friend, my sis, Julian Watkins, here from the New York Department of Health, also from the People's Clinic, also just from a lot of different aspects of my life. I used to be a bartender at Beverly's, and that is where Julie and I really hit it off. And from there, we've kind of had like a really great collaborative like partnership this year, doing a show for April TV called the People's Clinic, which has been highlighting public health in New York City around COVID. And I think we've really tackled a lot on that show when it comes to physical health, mental health, activism, and social welfare. A lot of themes, and it's always kind of like a great energy, like circling back to, I think, your own personal experience working as a Black queer person in medicine. And I've just learned so much from you this year, so it was kind of just like a no-brainer to have you on to kind of sit and just talk about you and where you're coming from in your own practice, and I think kind of what this year has taught you about work, and I think just the actual practical side of, I don't know, what medicine and care and like actual social care means in this climate. So with that intro, hi.
Hey, yeah. Reporting to you live from loud Lower East Side. So I don't know if you guys hear the car alarms, but
Now
it is
car alarm. After I'm like, no, you sound fine. You sound good.
It is what it is. Yeah, thanks for having me, Mace. It's yeah, we just hop right in. Like, I work at the health department, you know, and I'm in the Bureau of STI control, sexually transmitted infection control. And I think, you know, I got to the health department after a really traumatic event that happened in November 2016, and that kind of sparked me to, you know, become more active. And that's kind of when I sought out, you know, work that felt more fulfilling for my overall, like, for my core. I was like working in like, you know, private practice at a private hospital in the city, and it was just like, you know, you're doing the doctor thing, but it didn't hit right. So I found myself just looking for something that felt more fulfilling. And I think I've always been deathly afraid of like HIV and STIs, just from like, you know, the way the world works and shows us, like, you're Black or you're Latin and you're gay, you live in New York, it's like it's always coming for you. And I was just like, I know, the switch just clicked. It was like, you know what, I'm gonna face it head on. It's like, I'm a doctor, I can do this. And it's like the people coming in and the people who need the care the most look like me. They're my friends. They are me. And it was just like, yeah, like I have to face that fear head on and like, you know, just do it, because people need understanding. And like, you know, being a doctor, you hear all of this, you know, when you hear about HIV, you hear about like, you know, when the pandemic started and how horrible it was and all of this stuff, but you're just always hearing it from all these people, but you never get like this true, if you only learn about HIV from like movies and stuff, you'd only think that it was like, you know, gay cis white dudes who get it, where like the reality is our people of color have been suffering from it the most, you know, around the world, and we continue to get it. And so it was just like that understanding and bringing in that like a lot of doctors probably never have an HIV scare in their life, but as like a gay, you know, the gay man in the city, like you're always like scared about it, you know, every cough you get, you're like, is that it? So just bringing that kind of personal experience and understanding to the practice of medicine, I kind of got there from my HIV work. And I think the other part of it is being, you know, somewhat a history buff, reading about that crisis and just knowing how it shaped so much of our lives, and just understanding, you know, oh, you know, I'm a doctor or whatever, and like, you know, you have this role that you fill in society and stuff, and you know, like in the community, like, you know, you talk to people about stuff, and people text you or come to you with all these personal private questions or need some help, and so that's just like what you do, you know. And I just always just thinking like, what would I do if HIV happened? You know, if I was around back then as a physician, or what would I do now if something new happened? So, I mean, I guess it was a really good to be thinking about that, or just think, you know, like what if? So when I saw what was happening with the pandemic, with this current pandemic, in that moment, I just instantly went back to those thoughts of like, what do you do when everything is falling apart? Like, what skills do you have? How can you help people? How can you help the community and help yourself and help, you know, the people that you love? Because you know, again, that the system isn't going to really consider them and isn't going to really like take care of them in the way that they need. And so it was just an instant like step into action, let's do it. And it just like bringing in all of those kind of experiences, and like every like meeting I walk into, and every, you know, town hall that I'm in, and every, you know, place that I go, it's like I'm bringing those people with me, like the community, the family, you know, the best fam, like everyone. I'm bringing everyone there with me, and like I'm thinking about their needs at the same time. And that's kind of how I got to this place, and, you know, how to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think those parallels, especially for me early on during the pandemic, were so prominent in my mind about just kind of like the ACT UP era of like kind of like AIDS activism. And I think just being queer people that kind of came into our own after the wake, I think of that social mobilization by like the gay community. We've obviously felt kind of the lasting effects of that collective action. And I think that kind of unity over obviously a very traumatic event that has shaped literally generations to come. I mean, there's no way around it. And I feel like a lot of the mediated, I think, experiences, I always imagine kind of just like the mediated experience of, I think, kind of like queerness now kind of stems from like stigmas and things that I think kind of came from that era. Protective measures, though, in a lot of ways. But I think going back to, I think, kind of that pandemic, it's interesting to kind of see how much collective and the necessity for collective action and the necessity for collective action in this political moment tied to this pandemic because of the lack of social care our government is providing us. There's a lot of one-to-one parallels that are kind of coming as we live with this disease longer and longer. I'm interested in kind of maybe, since we've kind of shared a similar response, in just kind of the need for collective organizing during COVID, maybe just kind of talking about what pulling from like that queer history kind of means to you?
I'll say, you know, when we talk about the HIV crisis, and you know, people do it a lot. You know, it's a pandemic. You know, happened in New York City. It was a big thing in New York City. But I think what people don't do is they don't look at it with, they don't treat the people lost to that pandemic with the respect that they deserve. They don't treat the memory of those people. They don't treat the people who are living with HIV today. They don't, you know, and I think that's just number one. Like, we need to honor those people who were lost to that pandemic, because nobody deserved what happened. And I think if we really want to be really like just straight up about it, all of the work and action of the HIV era, all of that collective activism, all of the, you know, this political activism of like that came out of like the ACT UP energy, all of that is set the stage for what's bringing us in coronavirus response. Literally, they broke down all these barriers that were like set up by the government for like safety, and it was like, no, people are dying from an epidemic. We need to get experimental drugs out to people to give people a chance. Like, literally, this was from HIV. This is our legacy, the gay legacy, like that, to save us now. Like, all of these medical advancements, the HIV era, that all was brought out of that. And so I think, you know, everyone needs to, when they talk about HIV, you know, I mean, not like correcting him, just like, you know, like that's something that they need to talk about that, you know? And I think I mean, the pandemic it's crazy. But one thing that I've really noticed and that I've been so encouraged by is seeing how much this collective action has really stepped in to sustain people, and how many people were just regular everyday people with their regular everyday dreams and hopes and fears and whatever. And all of these people, just like, you just hear the story after story, people who like, this happened and they snapped into action, and they were doing their own thing, you know, and it may not have been necessarily, you know, you know, it wasn't like people like working in film industry or you know, like building furniture, but then people are just like, no, like, I want to do something to help people and to put positive out, help sustain people. And just to see that energy come out from people is amazing. And I think for me, it's just like, yeah, like, how does that look for someone who, you know, you know, everyone has art, you know, arts in them. Like, I'm not a formally trained artist, but like, how does someone who's a physician, who's much more than that, you know, like, how do I move that into the world, and how do I spread a message, you know, and get out that information in a way that like would, like, you know, to actually help people, and not this thing that people do where like, you know, do this, like, it's just not, it doesn't fit in people's lives, and it's really hard for people to integrate some of the recommendations that people make. It's like, like, how the hell do you social distance if you have like, you know, 3 roommates in a small apartment? What does that even look like? You know, they're not talking about to people like, you know, having the roommate talk where everyone comes together and like, what are we doing right now? How do we survive? Like, that's not like a thing, but it's totally a thing that needs to happen. So like, what are like those practical things and practical applications of some of this like knowledge that, you know, I've been trusted with, you know?
Yeah, and I think especially kind of the creative impulse, I think in a lot of ways is absolutely like creatively finding avenues to express this knowledge that you kind of like hold as like a physician and medically trained professional. And I think the avenue that you and your coworker Carlota Starks kind of ended on with the People's Clinic has been like such an incredible tool to kind of train people in social space, create space around you that creates like a level of comfort where you can actually have like one-to-one kind of questions and answers with like trained physicians. And I think a major aspect of this whole era right now too is just misinformation and just people not having a tight enough network to, I don't know, rely on to have these questions, you know, asked in I don't know, just an environment that like doesn't talk down to them or isn't actively trying to mislead them, which is like something that we keep coming into conflict with over and over and over from this administration specifically. And I think maybe it would be great to kind of just talk about the inception of the People's Clinic, how you and Carlota kind of came together, and yeah, just like recent.
It's, you know, it's definitely like a labor of love, you know, like with all of the things going on with the activation and being pulled and, you know, working, you know, when we were getting this off, I was working 80, 90 hours a week, you know, and it was just like, this culture, we're so connected and you can so instantly connect with, you're like, but there's, people don't talk about it. People don't talk about anything. We're always in this constant, like, nice zone, gray area where no one's being offended. We're not stepping on anybody's toes. We're not like, you know, and there's so much of that, but no one's just talking about shit and having that discourse. And it was just like, the discourse is missing. You know, you look in like the 60s and 70s, people were on TV and they're talking about shit. They're talking, they're debating, they're having a discourse, and it's not just talking heads with political points. They're getting to the nitty gritty of these real things that are going on. And, you know, you look in like the early women's movement, people were having these consciousness raising groups and people are coming together and they're talking about their lives and talking about all these things and they're problem solving and they're sharing techniques. And like, these are things that brought, you know, that spark movement. These are things that sustain movement. These are things that like help people, you know, get real change. And I think it just came down to, where's the discourse? I want to make a space that we can actually talk about stuff, but like the real stuff, and like really wrestle with it and struggle with it. And so it kind of came out of that. And I think, you know, not putting like, so it's so much focused on like winning arguments, and it's never about winning. It's not about winning. It's about understanding and trying to get some clarity and trying to make some sense of it. And if you can get some, you know, positive energy, some reinforcement, you know, can help you kind of reshift or reshape the way that you are seeing things or processing things, then that's all for the better too. So I think, yeah, it just came out of like that, a yearning for something more substantial, inaccessible, you know, in plain speak, as much as possible, you know. I definitely also wanted to focus like being in the present, you know, like what is happening today, like what's going on in the city now. Like we want to do we would do like city updates, like what's going on with the virus. Just talk about that and what does that mean, you know. And then each episode for the week, it was kind of based on what was going on. You know, like we had the episode about Beverly's where we brought in, you know, Leah Dixon, the owner. We brought Alex Rapini, you know, he also worked there and he's just in the Bev fam. And it was just, we had a whole episode and I really wanted to talk about the thing that nobody's talking about now. Like no one talks about loss. We're not talking about the almost 220,000 American United States people who are accounted for, you know. We're not talking about any of that. Where's this collective grief? You know, it's just this weird thing, and it's just, we have to talk about it because a lot of people have had people who died. So a lot of people don't have anyone personally, but a lot of people have died, and I think there's a national mourning that needs to happen. You know?
Yeah, I think the one thing that I really pulled from working on that project with you was a more holistic idea of what wellness is outside of, I mean, because there's just so much stigma around medical care in this country. It's so inaccessible, especially to the people that need it. It's increasingly being pushed out of communities that are actively using these resources because of lack of funding. And I think, you know, not only in the city, but in rural America or just places that aren't metropolitan, people have been forced to kind of fend for themselves when it comes to physical wellness, mental wellness, and just kind of having to, I don't know, I mean, it's kind of the bootstrapper mentality that's so dangerous about American ideology. But I really appreciated, because that's something that you're totally right, that I haven't heard of at all, is this ability to kind of step back and see the present, in kind of, it's kind of like just being able to kind of have the mental space to step back and analyze, which is something that we just haven't had the capacity to really do, because I mean, every other day there's something we have to.
We aren't given the tools for that. We're
Yeah.
not given, in this society, we're not given the tools for critical analysis. We're not given the tools for self, reflection and introspection. We live in this capitalist society, and the way that we look at our lives and the way we see the world is in a very twisted view that fits this capitalist way of like, I attain wokeness, or I attain, like, I am a Christian and I am saved. And it's like, there's work that goes with, like, you got to stay saved, you got to stay woke. And people are so looking at like this level of attainment, and it's like, that's just not it. And I think another big thing, from reading, a lot, I've been trying to do a lot of reading, like going back to like these like sacred texts, from like these, these Black liberation writers and feminists and all these people, going back, and like, there's this theme that everyone, like Audre Lorde, and like defining yourself for yourself, and like people, talking, like having some, to do this thing where you stop living for other people and being beholden to other people, and you kind of work, and it's kind of like focusing inward and making sure that your house is in order. Like, what do I need? What is my source of self-regard? What gives me my strength to keep going? And it's just, that's the work that has to be done, where then once you kind of get that place and you're like comfortable and you love yourself completely, fully, and you're able to like respect yourself and stand for something, then when you go out in the world, you're not as vulnerable. You can't be knocked down by the world, these people, all these things happening, because you are centered and you're so grounded in your history and your culture and your family. And I think if that's something that people could get from the show, I think a lot of people, the world would be a lot better if people kind of just stopped living for other people and kind of live for yourself in a generous and unselfish way. Because it's not, it's like real self-care, as like a practice of self, working on yourself, not like just getting your nails done.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that was definitely, when I was talking last week with Julian, something that I touched on, but I don't know if I necessarily elaborated fully, kind of the idea that I was like trying to get across. We were talking about, I called it education, he called it knowledge, which I think is way more, less hierarchical and kind of like language, which I totally, but this knowledge hoarding that I think comes with this current moment, which is like always in conflict with what I view as like, the correct answer is obviously collective action. But like, just, you mentioned wokeness, but also just like this hoarding of knowledge on like the political climate right now is something I'm trying to understand as well. Where I see kind of, I think, college educated people, I think kind of researching and hoarding and collecting kind of this knowledge to gain a certain type of like woke status. And I think instead of actually being able to, I think, kind of participate in the current political moment, it's way more of an ability to just speak on it instead of kind of action. And I think what I'm trying to bring are people in my life that I see being both harbingers of knowledge, but also have like a practice that is based in actual implication of that work. I don't know if that's necessarily a question, but more of just
I mean, it is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a question within a statement, and it's that I would say, yeah, that energy that you guys are talking about, it's about moving making the political personal, and when you make it personal and it's like a real truth in your life, like, how are you acting with this knowledge that you've attained? Like, how is it affecting the way that you are in a relationship with people? How is it affecting the way that you treat the environment? How is it affecting the way that you see yourself as like a supervisor on the job? You know, are you being thoughtful and mindful and empathetic? Are you just being a ball of, you know, of reaction? You know, are you taking it out on people? You know, and it's like, again, it's not this thing. It's the mindset that we're acculturated to in this country, where everything is about you. It's a commodity. Even the thought, even being fair-minded and understanding and having enlightenment is seen as a commodity that you have, and it's like you just put it on your shelf. Like, no, I got it. No, I'm woke. I got one on the shelf. But what the fuck are you doing with it? What good is it to have all this knowledge and to be able and not the whole point is to live, like, is to share it and spread it. Otherwise, good for you. Happy, you know, hooray for you. You've got the knowledge, you know, and you're sitting around watching, you know, watching The Bachelor. Like, great, thanks. The world is a better place now. Thank you.
Yeah, true.
Sis?
Yeah.
It's not hard.
It really, yeah, because I feel like that is like the one thing that like is kind of the harbinger for, I think, a lot of the political action happening now just kind of falling flat. And I think that's something that I'm really thankful that I don't think in a lot of ways momentum is slowed down by any means. But it also has definitely hardened some people in my life that I feel as though are kind of turning away from organizing and action because of, I don't know, the tension of actually coming in contact with hierarchical power structures that are actively oppressing you, which is its own type of depressing.
It's this thing, you know, it's all about that, how you perceive it, right? It's like, if you take it one day at a time, you kind of work within yourself and you keep, you know, you just focus on what's around you. You know, it's like, there's there's a process, you know, to build a house, there's a process. It starts from a patch of grass, you know, and then it ends up to, you know, and it can be a giant mansion. You have a city block that turns into a giant skyscraper, but it was all built one brick at a time, you know, and may have been a long process. There may have been good days and bad days. You know, you may have lost some friends on the way, you know, but it's like knowing that it's a process and that you're going to have to get your hands dirty and that it is going to be, you are going to have ups and downs, like an understanding, you know, like you got to push through because it's so worth it. Because the alternative is like nothing changes at all. And that shit can't stand. Like we've come way too far. And the fact that there is no bottom is what scares me the most. There's no bottom to the depths that people will sink. There was no bottom to the absence of the heart. I mean, they owned us. Mm-hmm. People owned us in this country, and it was legal. And they used this system and all the things that are set up to maintain people in chains for 250 years, mm-hmm. you know? And even since then, they still, you know, so there is no bottom. And I know what people are capable of. And so I think for me, it's like, what are we capable of? What am I capable of? What can I do? You know, where's my top? I don't know.
That's very true. I think we are getting close to the end of the interview. One thing we haven't talked about is COVID whatsoever. How has your relationship, I think, to medicine in these last few months kind of changed, and what practice, because of, you know, trying to get into, I think, maybe more nuanced conversations about the disease itself probably isn't the best use of our time right now. But I am really interested as like a healthcare professional, like from your own personal experience, what has really shifted in your day-to-day kind of when it comes to working during the pandemic?
So I work in a very particular setting. Like I haven't really been seeing patients the whole time. Like I've never physically taken care of a person who was tested positive for COVID, because like I'm in a different type of medicine, like I'm in public health. And I think for me, the biggest shift I would say is probably that I've shifted more from clinical medicine, that's traditional medicine that most people kind of encounter physicians as, like you walk into a clinic and someone sees you. I'm moving from that to more public health, like health department based, not necessarily one-on-one with patients, but like bigger like healthcare policy. Like we work on like campaigns for like what are the core four for COVID, cover your face, 6 distance, stay at home if you're sick, all of like wash your hands. Like it's like a different approach to medicine that I've kind of just seen the utility in that, because I guess going back to kind of what we were mentioning earlier, healthcare, like we talk about healthcare like this commodity, it's like this is healthcare. Everyone needs access to healthcare. The American healthcare system is broken. Full out, it's broken. Maternal fetal mortality in this country is worst of all the rich countries in the world. It's the worst, and it's on the backs of black women, regardless of their socioeconomic status. Because we almost lost Serena and Beyonce to maternal fetal mortality. So there's a broken system that people are struggling to get to, but even when they get to the system, it's broken. When Black people get to the clinics, they get treated like shit. When queer people make it to the clinics, they're getting treated like shit. If a trans person goes into an ER for a cough, somehow they'll have medical students and all these people looking up their skirt to see what's going on. And it's like, so for me, I think it was understanding that when people are talking about healthcare and getting access to healthcare and getting people in coverage, it's like this thing that people are trying to get, healthcare, is also damaging people. So it's more like, how can I change this thing called healthcare, or affect some kind of change, or at least start a conversation or keep a conversation going where we're addressing major issues and flaws within this system of healthcare that everyone is dying to get access to. Is that a dark joke?
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, very true. Well, I think if people would like to know more, I think, about your personal practice, I'm gonna just give you your flowers for a little bit, because you were nominated and won LGBTQ Nation's Hero of the Year. There's like an incredible article that you can check out on their website, an interview about you, which was really sweet, and I think kind of highlights a lot of the work that you've been doing this year, which I encourage people to go look at. We'll have a link in the description. Where could people follow you? Where could people find you? I know through People's Clinic,
we have a People's Clinic Instagram. I'm also but I've been a little less active from a lot of social media just because of work and stuff. But I definitely do want to do a revamp, because I got some really good news coming down the pipeline, and I kind of want to share that news and kind of do an episode soon, because I really want to talk about planning for what may be a long, dark, cold winter. And I think we should all come together and really have a serious conversation about what it's going to look like, what the winter of 2020 will look like. So I kind of want to bring that all in together. But Instagram, Sensitive Poppy, for my, daily shenanigans and New York Times cooking critiques, because
truly
I'm taking them to
Cute. All right, we'll put it all in the description. Julian, this was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on. And peace and blessings. Thank you so much.
Okay, so if it isn't obvious, I really love Julian. I think that he is an incredible angel on earth doing some really important work right now, and I just think amazing. I don't know. So I'm going to attach all of the stuff that I mentioned at the end in the description below. Please follow the People's Clinic. They're doing like incredible work. The archive of the episodes should be up on the Instagram, so you should go check them out over there. And yeah, I'll see you guys next Monday. Cheers.